A strike aimed at Lira struck him instead, and she defied every law to save his life. The ceremonial hall of Vera's capital shimmered like the inside of a rare geode. Crystalline arches soared overhead, channeling blue light that cascaded over hundreds of dignitaries. The air vibrated with anticipation and the scent of rare oils, bitter, sweet, and unfamiliar to human senses. Mason, the only human envoy in attendance, stood alone at the edge of the gallery, his pulse thrumming in his ears, his gaze fixed unerringly on the dais. There, at the heart of the hall, knelt Lira, the soon-to-be sovereign. The crowd seemed to recede around her, giving way to the aura she radiated, part fragile, part fierce. Her synthetic skin, pale and almost translucent, refracted the blue light. Short, doll-like pink hair framed her features and drew attention to her winter blue eyes, eyes that held a secret pain masked by dignity. As the chief oracle intoned an ancient melody, the ceremony deepened. High above, silver orbs hovered in a corona above Lyra's brow, shifting and rotating in time with the chanted harmonics. The dignitaries pressed closer, some faces open with awe, others shadowed by calculation. Mason scanned the assembly. He recognized Commander Sarek near the front, a man whose gaze was all knife edges and unspoken threats. Sarek's presence was a warning, his posture rigid, his eyes tracking both Mason and Lyra with equal suspicion. The political fault lines in the room were invisible, but perilously real. A flicker of movement snagged Mason's attention. At the periphery, an attendant, face bland, hands too steady, revealed the briefest glint of metal. Mason's instincts screamed. The device was impossibly small, but the intent behind it unmistakable. It was aimed directly at Lyra. Time contracted. Mason vaulted the gallery rail, glass shoes ringing as he hit the floor. The assembly erupted in startled cries. Robes flared as dignitaries recoiled. The music faltered. Mason sprinted toward the dais, lungs burning, heart jackhammering. A beam of energy lanced through the chaos, crackling with a cold blue-white intensity. Mason lunged, throwing himself between Lyra and the incoming pulse. Pain, immediate, glacial, electrifying, tore through his side. He collapsed, vision scattering into shards. The ritual shattered into panic. Lyra's poise dissolved. For the first time, fear twisted her features. Protocol and tradition fell away as she rushed from the dais, the silver orbs faltering above her head. Kneeling at Mason's side, she pressed her hands against the wound, heedless of her ceremonial attire. Her voice was raw, trembling with urgency. "Mason, can you hear me?" He managed a crooked grin. "Wouldn't miss your big day for the world." The crowd surged in, guards forming a barrier, medics in white and silver uniforms descending. The scent of oils was replaced by antiseptics and the coppery tang of his own blood. Darkness claimed him. He woke in a sterile chamber, the walls pulsing with soft azure light. Machines hovered at his bedside, their displays dancing with incomprehensible data. Every breath brought pain, a cold ache that seemed to unravel him from the inside. He tried to sit up, but weakness pinned him. Beyond a transparent barrier, Lyra argued with the chief medic, a man with metallic lines etched into his skin, voice clipped with frustration. "You cannot stabilize his systems. That device was molecular." Lyra cut him off, ice in her tone. "There must be something, anything. It was meant for you, Sovereign, to sterilize, not kill. But in a human, find another way." Mason caught only fragments, but enough to understand. The weapon had been intended to render Lyra incapable of continuing her lineage. For him, it had triggered a catastrophic, irreversible decay. The medics, alien and brilliant as they were, could do nothing. Hours, maybe less. Outside, chaos brewed. The corridor beyond the barrier echoed with voices. Sira, Lira's advisor, urgent and anxious. Commander Sarek, his words sharp and poisonous. You see, the human's presence is a curse. The people will not accept this. Sira pressed, distance yourself. For the sake of the crown. For your own safety. Lira's reply was ice-edged. He saved my life. I owe him more than silence. Silence pressed in as Sira and Sarek retreated. Moments later, the chamber door hissed open and Lira entered, the silver orbs gone from her brow. She seemed smaller without the trappings of sovereignty, but her presence electrified the air. Mason managed a weak smile. You should have let Sarek lecture me. I bet I could have taught him a thing or two about manners. For the first time, Lyra's lips twitched, almost a smile. She sat at his bedside, hands folded. Her eyes, luminous and unguarded, met his. In my world, she said softly, to shield another from harm is a debt of the soul. I cannot let you pay alone. He tried to make light of it, but the words caught in his throat. You know, on Earth, a handshake usually suffices. She ignored the quip. There is a way. Forbidden, but it could heal you. If I do this, our fates, our lives, will be entwined. Forever. Mason, this is not a small thing. He searched her face, found only truth. Hope flickered in him, fragile and impossible. Lira rose, her silhouette etched against the sterile light. Decide quickly. There is little time. She paused, then reached out, brushing her fingers across his brow. A gesture tender and ancient. Hold on, Mason. She left, the echo of her words lingering, a fragile hope in the heart of chaos. The chamber of convergence hummed with an ancient living energy. Vaulted stone and glass curved overhead, funneling a faint, wordless song to the luminous heart of the room, a crystal lattice the height of a man, pulsing with colors unnameable. The air itself seemed charged, the scent sharp and clean like rain striking hot metal. Mason stood at its edge, bare-chested, breath steaming in the chill. Every wound and fracture in his flesh throbbed in time with the lattice's light. Lira stood beside him, her ceremonial gown replaced by a simple tunic, hair shorn even and eyes storm-bright with conviction. The chief medic lingered near the entrance, hands clenched in agitation, silver circuitry on his skin flickering. This is folly, the medic said, voice trembling. The rite is irreversible. Mason's biology will be overwritten. His cells, his mind, bound to yours, Sovereign. He will be consort, not merely healed. Human and Varen, one organism. Mason tried to steady his breath. Pain licked up his side, sharpening his senses. He looked at Lira, searching her face for fear, regret, anything to halt him. But she was resolute, gaze unwavering. There is no undoing this, she said quietly, so only he would hear. Once done, the bond is eternal. Our lives, our thoughts, entwined. Is this what you choose? He hesitated only a moment, feeling the heaviness of fate pressing down. Yet, trust was a living thing between them now, fragile and real. He managed a crooked smile. I'd rather be alive and tangled with you than dead and alone. Let's do it. A flicker of something, gratitude, relief, passed through Lyra's eyes. She nodded to the medic who turned away in resignation. Mason and Lira approached the crystal lattice, each extending a trembling hand. The surface was cool, alive with inner motion. On my signal, Lira whispered, do not let go. Their palms met the lattice. A surge of light burst from the crystal, pouring through their skin, their bones. Pain seared, brighter than lightning. Mason arched back. A silent scream caught in his throat, his body burning and freezing at once. Lira convulsed beside him, her face contorted, but she gripped his hand, refusing to release him. In an instant, Mason was falling, no longer in the chamber but spiraling through Lyra's memories, each one a vivid torrent. Endless training in echoing halls, voices cold and exacting, the loneliness of command, the weight of expectation heavier than any physical chain. Her moments of rebellion, rare flashes of joy, the silent ache of isolation. He felt her fear, her certainty, her hope, himself seen through her eyes. At the same time, Lyra gasped, overwhelmed by an onrush of sensation foreign and raw. Mason's childhood laughter, the warmth of family dinners, the ache of heartbreak, the stubborn ember of hope that had carried him across light years to this moment. She felt what it was to be human, the mingled pain and wonder, the craving for connection. The agony peaked, then vanished. The chamber snapped back into focus. The crystal lattice, once brilliant, now glowed faintly, its energy spent. Mason staggered, caught by Lyra's steadying hands. Her touch was familiar, uncannily so. He looked up, meeting her gaze, and in that instant knew her thoughts, the echo of her soul, as if they were his own. They stared at each other, stunned, breathing hard, sovereign and envoy, now something beyond either. Silence stretched, filled with the crackle of what had just passed between them. Lyra drew in a shaking breath, her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. The medic, uncertain, watched from the shadows, eyes wide with awe and dread. Time blurred. When Mason next surfaced, he lay in a room suffused with warm light, Lyra's private quarters. The chamber was serene, lined with living crystal and woven glass, its windows offering a silent view of the city's sprawling arcs. He felt different, each limb humming with vitality. Even the memory of pain had faded. But more than that, he felt Lyra, a gentle presence at the edge of his thoughts. He sat up, the sheets smooth and unfamiliar. Before he could orient himself, the door whispered open and Lyra entered. She wore a plain robe, hair tucked behind her ears. In her hands was a tray of food, soft breads, crystalline fruit, a bowl of fragrant broth. "You're awake," she said softly. Her voice vibrated in his chest as much as his ears. She set the tray before him and sat, watching with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Mason tried to find words, but a surge of emotion, her emotion, washed over him. Worry, relief, the memory of pain, and a deep, aching fondness. Lyra. He searched her face, then his own mind, discovering her there like a second heartbeat. "I can feel you." She nodded. "As I feel you. It is unsettling." He reached for the bread. The hunger that gnawed at him was not entirely his own. As he tasted the fruit, flavor burst across his tongue and, in his mind, delight flared. A response from Lyra, unguarded. Their eyes met, startled by the intimacy of the sensation. Syrah entered, her posture stiff with disapproval. "You should rest, Sovereign. The city is aflame with rumor. Sarek accuses you of sacrilege. He has declared open conflict. Mason is now consort. He is at the heart of scandal." Lyra's jaw tightened. "Let them talk. I will not deny what has been done." Syrah's eyes darted to Mason. "You have made yourself vulnerable. To Sarek, to the Assembly, to the very code of our people. I know what I've risked." Lyra's voice was iron. "Leave us." Syrah bowed stiffly and retreated, the door sealed behind her. Mason met Lyra's eyes, feeling her tension, her pride, the ache of uncertainty. He tried to lighten the air. "So, consort, huh? Does that come with a badge or just a really awkward parade?" Lyra's lips twitched, the smallest hint of amusement. "Perhaps both. I am told humans appreciate ceremony." They ate together, sharing each taste, each texture. a strange harmony of bodies and minds. When Lira sipped the broth, Mason tasted warmth and spice in his own mouth. When he chewed the bread, she savored the sweetness of grain. Emotions ebbed and flowed, his gratitude mingling with her anxiety, her hope interlaced with his confusion. Every glance was loaded, every shared sensation a silent conversation. Later, Lyra worked at her desk, eyes scanning reports projected in the air, while Mason wandered to the window. The city unfolded in crystalline terraces, bathed in dusk light. He reached for a thought, any thought to distract himself, but a sudden, stabbing pain lanced through his skull. He gasped, clutching the sill, his vision swimming. He was somewhere else. He saw a council chamber filled with sharp faces, felt a surge of contempt, ambition, fury, emotions not his own. Words echoed, foreign yet understood. The sovereign has violated the old code. Now is the time. Strike before the bond solidifies. He saw Sarek's face, eyes bright with calculation, hands clasped around a data rod. Mason's heart hammered in his chest. He was seeing through Sarek's eyes, thinking Sarek's thoughts. The sensation was nauseating, invasive. Lyra, he croaked. She was at his side in an instant, steadying him. What is it? Mason shuddered, pressing his palms to his temples. I saw Sarek. I heard him. He's planning something. Open attack. Maybe worse. I was in his mind. Lyra's face paled, fear flickering in her eyes. The disruptor. It must have carried a neural agent, intended to bind my mind, to control me. But it linked me to Sarek instead, Mason finished, realization dawning. I'm a conduit. Whatever he thinks, I can feel it. Sometimes. Maybe even see it. Her hands tightened around his. This bond, it's more than we thought. It is not just personal, Mason. It is a weapon. Or a curse. He met her gaze, the connection between them humming with uncertainty and dread. Around them, the city's lights flared, and somewhere, Sarek's shadow lengthened, a threat felt in both their hearts. Mason was confined to the farthest reaches of Lyra's private wing, a suite of crystalline chambers veiled from the rest of the palace by silent security fields and Veyran sentries. The space, though opulent, felt like a gilded cage, walls pulsing faintly with encoded sigils, windows filtering in pale, uncertain light. He paced the length of the sitting room, anxiety gnawing at him with every passing hour. Captain Rena's voice carried through the sealed doors, sharp as broken glass. He is a liability, Sovereign. Sarek's agents already whisper of infiltration. If he remains... Lyra's reply was steel over velvet. He is no longer merely an envoy, Rena. He is my consort. His safety is paramount. Forgive me, but your judgment is final. The doors slid open. Rena, tall and armored in iridescent plates, glared at Mason with open distrust before departing, her steps echoing down the corridor. Lyra entered, her composure only slightly marred by fatigue. She found Mason standing at the window, staring down at the city's crystalline spires. Without ceremony, she stepped close, her presence a balm and a challenge at once. He broke the silence first, voice low. I'm sorry for the trouble. She shook her head. You are not the trouble, Mason. Sarek is. And together, we may yet turn his weapons against him. They began to explore the psychic link with growing purpose. The process was delicate, a balance between intrusion and surrender, curiosity and fear. For Mason to listen in on Sarek's thoughts, he needed to let down the fragile mental walls that protected his own mind. Each time, it was like lowering himself into a cold, alien sea. Lyra became his anchor, guiding him with Veyran meditative techniques, rhythmic breathing, visualization of safe harbors, subtle touches that grounded him in his own sense of self. Focus on my voice, she whispered, fingertips resting against his temple. You are not alone. I am with you. The link was most vivid in moments of physical contact. They discovered this during a session at dusk, when the sky bled violet and silver and the palace hummed with distant alarms. Lira sat beside Mason on a low couch, her hand poised over his brow. Are you ready? She asked softly. He exhaled, forcing himself to relax. Let's do it. As her palm touched his skin, Mason felt the boundary of his thoughts blur. Through the haze of the bond, he reached, past his own memories, through the neural thread left by the disruptor, and into the cold, calculating mind of Sarek. Images flooded him, camouflaged transports slipping through hidden gates, crates stacked with illegal weaponry beneath the guise of medical aid. He heard Sarek's voice, issuing clipped orders, timing, routes, codes. Mason gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his brow. Convoys, he gasped. Sarek's moving supplies disguised as medics. Route 13, Midnight, Eastgate. Lyra's eyes widened, her focus razor sharp. She squeezed his hand. Hold on. She signaled her command staff, issuing orders with a flurry of precise gestures. The council's balance shifted as Sarek's convoys were intercepted that night, his power base suddenly exposed. Whispers of Lyra's cunning spread through the palace, while Sarek's inner circle scrambled to recover. But victory exacted a price. Sarek, realizing the intrusion, retaliated with psychic force. The first attack came as a spike of agony that drove Mason to his knees, clutching his skull, vision swimming with fractured images, flashes of violence, hatred, chaos. The pain was raw, electric, searing through the bond. Lyra rushed to his side, her presence a shield against the onslaught. She gathered him into her arms, cradling his head, her own consciousness woven with his as she whispered words in the ancient tongue of her people. You are not his. Stay with me. Follow my voice. Night after night, the assaults continued. Mason suffered nightmares so vivid he awoke drenched in sweat, memories torn and rearranged, reality slipping sideways. Sometimes he screamed, sometimes he was silent, shuddering in the dark, Lyra's cool hand pressed to his cheek. She stood sentinel over his sleep, sharing his pain, lending him her strength. One night, after a particularly brutal episode, Mason found himself on the balcony, the cold air bracing against his fevered skin. He stared out at the city's sleeping lights, their glow blurred by exhaustion. His thoughts were a tangle of hope and despair, longing and fear. He heard the soft whisper of Silk behind him. Lyra joined him, her presence at once soothing and electric. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she stood close, her shoulder brushing his, the space between them charged with unspoken questions. Mason closed his eyes, searching for words. Only one came. Lyra. She turned, her face shadowed but open, vulnerability etched in every line. He managed a weary smile. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. She touched his arm, her hand light but steady. You are not alone, Mason. I feel your pain, every echo of it, and I would bear it with you, if you let me. He exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing. The bond between them pulsed, alive with emotion, his exhaustion mingling with her quiet determination, her loneliness soothed by his presence. In that moment, the palace and its politics seemed to fall away, leaving only the fragile, real thing they shared. I'm scared, he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. So am I, Lyra replied, her words trembling. But I choose you. Again and again. Their hands found each other, fingers entwining. A warm current passed through the bond, carrying comfort, affection, a surge of longing that left them both breathless. For a long moment they stood in silence, the city below bearing witness to the beginnings of something tender, fierce, and unbreakable. Mason looked at her, seeing both the sovereign and the woman, the strength and the vulnerability. Lira met his gaze, her eyes luminous in the darkness. Their shared pain, their growing trust, the ache of something more. All of it hung in the space between them, a promise and a challenge. As the night deepened, Mason drew Lira close, resting his forehead against hers. They stood together on the balcony, two souls entwined by fate, holding fast against the storm. Sarek, desperate now, unleashed his fleet against Vera's capital. From the high towers, alarms screamed across the crystalline city, signaling the approach of war. Sirens cut through the air, drowning out the council's arguments as panic and defiance spread through the palace like wildfire. Outside, the night fractured with the orange and cobalt glow of incoming warships, Sarek's banners twisting in the storm-lit sky. Within the Sovereign's wing, Mason and Lira stood at the center of a maelstrom and shut out the chaos. Lyra's private war chamber glowed with battle maps and flickering communiques, but her focus was absolute. Mason's eyes were closed, brow furrowed, the psychic link straining with the raw electric pulse of Sarek's mind. Every thought, every fragment of malice or strategy came to Mason now, unfiltered. Lyra's hand rested on his arm, grounding him. What does he plan? Mason winced as a jolt of foreign intent lashed through him. He wants to break through the city's outer shields. He's ordered his supply flotilla to circle wide, hidden behind medical transponders. He's using the Dominion, his flagship, for a direct assault. Sarek thinks he can shatter your command before dawn. Lyra's lips pressed into a hard line. She motioned to the tactical display, pulling up the city and the swirling chaos of incoming vessels. Then we'll turn his certainty against him. Minutes later, Lira swept into the command chamber, every movement radiating the poise and force of a sovereign. Her commanders assembled, faces grim, eyes wary. The admiral, silver-haired and unflinching, stepped forward. Sovereign, if we are wrong, the city falls. You wager all of Vera on the inside of your consort? Lira held the room with her gaze. We fight not only with our shields, but with the truth Sarek himself provides. We will outflank his supply lines and shatter his advantage before he knows he's exposed. The admiral nodded, grave but convinced. We stand ready. May fortune favor your rule. A pulse echoed through the palace as the council's decision transmitted to the fleet. Lira turned to Mason, searching his face for any shadow of doubt. He managed a strained smile, the psychic static of Sarek's fury still flickering in his mind. You trust me? He asked quietly. I trust you with my world, she replied, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. The royal flagship, Ascendant, was a cathedral of war, its bridge a sweep of luminous controls, hollow tables, and officers bristling with tension. Mason and Lira stood at its heart, the hum of engines and distant artillery merging into an anxious rhythm. The comms officer's voice cut through the din. Enemy armada entering high orbit, Dominion at the vanguard. Mason shut his eyes, feeling for the connection. Sarek's mind seethed. He saw flashes of the Dominion's bridge, of tactics and fury, of the pulse of weapons primed for annihilation. He's going to punch through the central corridor, Mason murmured, breath ragged. He thinks our defense will collapse if the Ascendant falls. Lyra's eyes narrowed. She turned to her admiral. Divide the fleet, outflank his supply ships, sever their retreat and regroup here. The Ascendant holds position. Draw Sarek in. Understood. The admiral relayed the orders, and the Veyran fleet surged into motion, wings of crystal and fire curving through the void, closing around Sarek's overconfident armada. Outside, the night was torn by barrages of light. The Ascendant shuddered as impact struck the shields. The bridge crew worked in a ballet of precision, responding to Lyra's calm commands. Suddenly, Mason stiffened. A cold presence pressed against his mind, alien, invasive, irresistible. Sarek. Mason's muscles locked. His fingers twitched against the command interface and his eyes glazed with a blue-white light. Across the gulf of space, Sarek's consciousness hammered into him, not with pain, but with the iron will to dominate. Mason's hand hovered, trembling, over the flagship's defense controls. Sarek's voice echoed, not aloud, but inside his skull. "Open the shields. Surrender. This is your fate." Mason's body obeyed, his will buckling under the assault. He heard alarms as the command protocols began to unlock, felt the eyes of the bridge crew turning in horror. Lira was at his side in an instant, her hands cupping his face. "Mason, listen to me. Do not fight him like this. Let go. Do not use discipline. Use your heart. Chaos, passion, the things that make you human." His vision swam. He saw Sarek sneer, felt the pressure tightening. Years of training screamed at him to build walls, to resist with cold logic. But Lyra's voice, soft and fierce, cut through the noise. "Let it out, Mason, all of it." He let the walls fall. Fear surged up, memories of pain, of being powerless, of dying and being remade. But then came hope, the joy of laughter, the taste of rain, the thrill of Lyra's hand in his, and love, raw and blinding, the kind that made him leap in front of a gun, the kind that refused to yield even when reason failed. He unleashed the storm of his soul. The link became a torrent. Emotions roared through, sweeping away Sarek's carefully constructed order. Mason's chaos overwhelmed the invader. Terror, longing, hope, and love lashed against Sarek's mind. Sarek recoiled, howling in psychic agony, his control shattering. Mason collapsed into Lyra's arms, gasping. On the tactical display, Dominion wavered, command signatures flickering. Veyron interceptors surged forward, lances of energy piercing the flagship's shields. Dominion erupted in a silent bloom of fire, its destruction echoing through every comm channel. The rest of Sarek's fleet faltered. Leaderless, they broke formation. Some fled, some surrendered. Others simply drifted, powerless and confused. On the Ascendant's bridge, silence fell, broken only by the hiss of cooling consoles. Lyra drew Mason upright, her touch steady, her eyes shining with relief and awe. "It's over," she whispered. Mason nodded, exhausted but alive. The rebellion had been broken by the one thing Sarek could not comprehend: human chaos, the wild, ungovernable heart. Outside, the city's shields shimmered, untouched. Within the flagship, Lira and Mason stood side by side, the weight of victory settling between them, not just as sovereign and consort, but as two souls forever changed by the battle they had fought together. In the aftermath of battle, Vera's palace was transformed. Sunlight poured through shattered arches, illuminating faces worn with fear, relief, and the first hints of hope. The High Council assembled in the Hall of Accord, a chamber that had known centuries of ceremony, its blue crystal columns rising like frozen lightning toward the sky. Where once tradition demanded layers of regalia and separation, Lyra stood before the council in simple attire, her pale hands unadorned but steady at her sides. At her right, Mason, no longer an outsider nor a curiosity, but something new. A symbol carved out of chaos and courage. Around them, the last echoes of Sarek's insurrection faded into silence. His supporters, stripped of command and bluster, knelt in surrender at the foot of the dais. Some bowed their heads in shame, others watched Lyra with a wary respect. The banners of the old guard, once bright with threat, now lay furled and forgotten at the council's edge. Mason's presence was a quiet defiance of old law. He wore no uniform, only the crisp lines of Veyran formal dress borrowed for the occasion, his human features sharp in the crystalline light. Where some counselors might once have looked away, now they watched him. Some with curiosity, some with gratitude, none with scorn. Lyra's voice, when it rose, was clear and unwavering. "We have seen the edge of ruin," she said, her words echoing through the vastness. "We have seen what happens when fear governs us, when we cling to isolation and refuse to change." She let her gaze sweep across the assembly, not with judgment, but with the weight of shared survival. "Our strength does not lie in isolation, nor in the purity of tradition. It lies in daring to change, and in building alliances with those we once called outsiders." She reached for Mason's hand, drawing him forward until they stood together before the council, fingers intertwined, a living declaration of unity. A hush fell. Mason felt the eyes of the room, the pressure of expectation. He squeezed Lyra's hand, grounding himself in the warmth of her touch, the steady hum of their psychic bond now woven through both their minds, a current of reassurance, not fear. Lyra continued, her words intimate and unyielding. "I present to you Mason of Earth, not as a scandal, but as a symbol. A consort whose courage saved our realm, whose heart taught me the power of trust and vulnerability. Together, we forged a path through crisis not because we are the same, but because we chose to stand together in difference." She turned, addressing the kneeling former conspirators as much as the loyalists. "Let this be our future, a realm built not on walls and suspicion, but on shared strength and openness. Let the children of Vera remember this day as the beginning of something greater than any of us alone." The council chamber held its breath. Then, one by one, the councillors rose, some offering the Veyran salute, palms over heart, others simply bowing their heads in assent. The old lines of division softened, replaced by the fragile beginnings of unity. Mason glanced at Lyra, saw the relief flicker across her features, saw it mirrored in the minds and hearts of those around them. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe in a future here, not as an intruder, but as a partner. When the council dispersed, the palace settled into a new, uncertain peace. The city beyond the windows pulsed with life, workers and healers tending to wounds, families emerging into streets cleansed by rain, the old scars of conflict fading beneath a dawn that seemed, improbably, fresh. Later, in the sanctuary of her private quarters, Lyra laid aside the burdens of rule, the great doors sealed behind her, muffling the distant bustle of the palace. Mason stood on the balcony, hands braced on the cool rail, gazing out over the city's tangled light. In the hush, his thoughts roamed, memories of fire and fear, of impossible choices, and the strange, wild hope that had carried him across the stars. He felt her approach before he heard it, the subtle shift in the air, the warmth of her presence blooming at his back. Lyra slipped her arms around him, cheek resting against his spine, her breath soft and steady. For a long time they stood in silence, letting the world fall away. The bond between them thrummed, not as a warning, not as a weapon, but as a gentle, living thing. Mason closed his eyes, covering her hands with his own. "I can feel your thoughts," Lyra murmured, her voice colored with a teasing fondness. "They are less orderly than I expected from a diplomat." He chuckled, the sound vibrating through her arms. "That's because you're getting the real thing, not the polished version. It's a mess up here. Always has been." She smiled, pressing closer. "It is a beautiful mess, full of colors and warmth. I never imagined I would crave such chaos." He turned, just enough to see her eyes, soft now, stripped of the sovereign steel. "You know, I used to think I had to keep everything in order, keep myself separate. Turns out, all the best things happen when I let someone in. She kissed his shoulder, lips cool and gentle. Then let us make a new order, one that belongs to both of us. Mason drew her hands up, cradling them against his heart. Together, they looked out over the city, its towers gleaming in the afterglow, the scars of battle fading beneath the promise of renewal. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Choosing me? Choosing this?" Lira shook her head, hair brushing his skin. "Not for a moment. You brought me back to myself, Mason. You made me believe in the strength of vulnerability, in the power of hope." He smiled, pulling her closer. "And you showed me what it means to fight for something bigger than myself. To belong." The city lights shimmered, reflected in the mirrored glass of the balcony rail. For the first time since the day he arrived on Vera, Mason felt the weight of the world ease. Not vanished, but shared. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs. As the night deepened, laughter rose between them, soft, genuine, and full of promise. Lira rested her head against his back, her arms a living shield, her heart in rhythm with his. Together, they watched the city below, the bond between them no longer a source of crisis, but a comfort, a quiet, unbreakable connection lighting the path ahead. Time passed, as it always did, at first in breathless rushes, then in slow, steady tides. The realm of Vera, once poised on the brink of ruin, settled into something new. Under Lyra's reign, the city's crystalline towers shone brighter each day, their fractured scars healing beneath banners of hope and unity. The old council, once fractious and secretive, learned to debate in the open. New voices, young, old, and even a few human, echoed in the halls of power. Lyra's reforms moved from promise to practice. She untangled the knots of ancient law, opening the gates to ideas and people long kept at arm's length. What had once been taboo, her bond with Mason, became the cornerstone of a new era. To the people of Vera, it was living proof that resilience and change could coexist, that strength could be found in the unlikeliest of alliances. Mason remained, in many ways, an outsider. Yet in the spaces between, he became something else. A bridge between worlds. A trusted advisor whose insight cut through old assumptions. His empathy, honed on two worlds, proved invaluable. He listened where others postured, translated nuance across cultures, and wielded his outsider's perspective as gently as a scalpel. At council gatherings, he learned to read the subtle signals of Veran politics. A tilt of the chin, a flicker of light in winter blue eyes. He made mistakes, sometimes spectacularly, but owned them with a wry humility that earned him both grudging respect and unexpected friendships. Commander Rena, once his fiercest critic, now clinked glasses with him at state banquets, her laughter echoing through the grand hall. The chief medic, who had doubted his survival, now sought his counsel on integrating human medicine with Veran healing. Even Syrah, Lyra's wary advisor, found herself consulting Mason when diplomacy wavered on a knife's edge. In the city's markets, children pointed and grinned, whispering stories of the human consort who had saved the realm. The romance that had begun in shadow, threatened by politics and violence, became something open, celebrated. At council feasts, amid toasts and the low hum of conversation, Lyra would find Mason's hand beneath the table, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. He would lean in, whispering in Earth's tongue or in the new private language they had built between their minds. Sometimes his words made her winter blue eyes sparkle. Sometimes they drew a laugh that silenced the room. Their connection, once a scandal, became the city's favorite legend. Alone, in the hush of night, they wandered the palace gardens. Crystalline flowers glimmered under starlight, and the air was perfumed with the memory of rain. They spoke in silence, thoughts shared through the bond, each touch and glance rich with meaning. Lyra would pause by a pool, trailing her fingers through the water, and Mason would sense her weariness, the weight of decisions yet to be made. He would press a kiss to her temple, offering comfort without words. In return, she soothed the knots of his own anxieties with a single look, reminding him over and over that he was not alone. As seasons turned, their partnership deepened. Mason learned to shoulder the responsibilities of leadership, sometimes in council chambers, sometimes by Lyra's side in the city's hospitals and academies. When Lyra's resolve threatened to falter under centuries of duty, Mason steadied her. When his own hope flickered in the face of old prejudice or fresh uncertainty, she was his anchor. Their love was not a shield against hardship, but a force that made them both stronger. Two lives fused by choice, not just fate. On the eve of the ceremony marking the end of the conflict, the palace shimmered with anticipation. Light spilled through the great windows, washing over banners stitched with new symbols, human and Veyran entwined. In her private dressing chamber, Lyra stood before the mirror, her reflection crowned not with jewels, but with purpose. Mason stood behind her, hands deft and gentle as he fastened the silver coronet that marked her sovereignty. Their eyes met in the glass. Lyra's gaze, deep as the oldest winter, held the memories of centuries, the burdens of rule, the loneliness of command, the ache of losses endured. Mason's, bright with the promise of new beginnings, reflected wonder and the quiet strength he had found in her shadow. Lyra's breath trembled as she spoke, voice barely more than a whisper. "We are not alone anymore." Mason's hands found her waist, steady and sure. He turned her gently, so they stood face to face, the world narrowed to the space between them. He pressed his forehead to hers, their breaths mingling. "Whatever comes," he murmured, "I choose you, not because of the bond, but because I want to." She closed her eyes, letting herself lean into him, letting centuries of restraint dissolve into trust. "And I choose you, Mason," again and again. Their lips met in a kiss that was both promise and defiance, soft at first, then fierce, a declaration written in hope rather than fear. Outside, the city waited. Inside, time seemed to pause, the burdens of the world suspended by the certainty of their embrace. At dawn, Vera's capital glowed with the light of a new era. The palace gates opened and Lyra and Mason stepped out together. Ruler and consort, partners and lovers, side by side. The council stood assembled. Citizens gathered in the plazas and on rooftops. Every eye turned to the pair on the steps, some with pride, some with awe, all with hope. Their hands remained entwined, visible to all. The old world had been transformed, not erased, but reshaped by the storms they had weathered and the choices they had made. The future, uncertain as it was, belonged to them now. As they descended the steps together, Mason glanced at Lyra and she smiled, her heart light, her burdens shared, her spirit free. Whatever the world might bring, they would face it as one. That's the end of the story. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.